Charles, we are about to make internet history as two of the Clintons' most powerful adversaries are joined together here for the first time. It's a pleasure to welcome back to the show Larry Nichols. Larry, hello and welcome to Charles Ortel is Closing In.
Well, thank you. Pleasure being here, and I'm impressed with Charles and the work he does.
Well, likewise, sir. It's an honor to have you on air. And I know our viewers and listeners would love to know just how far back you go with the Clintons. When did you first get involved looking into what Bill Clinton and his family were up to?
When he was running for governor the first time, which I think was 78, so I would have been brought in 77 by the Stevenses. Uh-huh. And they said they had a guy that they were going to get elected governor, and they wanted me to check him out and see what I thought about him. So I go meet Bill at a place called John Barleycorn's, and he was pinching the waitress's butts. I mean, he couldn't even talk to me for looking at the girls. I mean, it was just ridiculous. He lied about every other sentence. So I went back to Mr. Witt and Mr. Jack. We went up to their office up at the top of the Twin City Bank building there in North Little Rock. And I told them, I said, well, they said, what have you done for the way we pay? I said, well, here's what you got. He's a liar, pathological liar. He's a helpless womanizer, sicko. He's a drug addict. And you can't trust him for anything. Mr. Witt took that big old cigar he smoked and pushed it down in his tea and said, we paid you big money for that. I said,
well, it sounds like he's their guy.
I said, well, you know, here's the deal. I told you all this stuff, but I did not say I couldn't get him elected. And they said, well, how the hell are you going to do that? I said, well, we can never make people like him, but we can make people hate him. And about that time, Mr. Jack said, well, you're so far over our heads, we don't even know what you're talking about. I said, well, for every person that hates him, there's a person that hates that person. And so if they're running around saying, don't you vote for that creep, that's who they're going to vote for. And it was using reverse polarity, which we didn't call it polarity back then, and he got elected.
Well, when you were doing that work, how deeply did you get into the land deals that Clinton had done with Jim McDougal?
I wasn't involved with any of that. As a matter of fact, that was Hillary, and I didn't like Hillary, and she didn't like me. So I was kind of hands off of that. I was totally involved with the campaign, and then when he was elected, it was my job to make him do what the Stevenses wanted. And, you know, so it was just a full-time job, essentially, to stay on top of it. Mm-hmm. Keep him out of trouble.
Which was a tough thing to do, and probably, well, it proved impossible to do in the first term because he didn't get reelected immediately after his first term as governor. Isn't that right?
That's right. What happened, I went into Mr. Witt, Mr. Jack. Jack said, listen, Nichols, he betrayed us. I said, well, I told you he would. He said, well, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to put him back in. We're going to put in Frank White, a Republican. I said, there are no Republicans in Arkansas. And he said, well, he's one. And so Frank White was as big a goomba as you've ever seen in your life. I mean, he was Joe Biden times 10 as far as just being ridiculously stupid. But we got him elected. And then when I was working with him, Clinton went to the Stevens brothers and made up with them. And then they got me back in and said, now we're going to put him back in. I said, well, you can't trust him. They said, well, we'll trust him this time. And there it went.
So I've been doing some research into the various aspects of the Clintons' lives, trying to figure out what it is that they are so desperately afraid of the general public finding out. And one of the things I researched was this whole Whitewater deal and why was everybody focusing on it? Because in my experience, when the Clintons ask you to focus or allow you to focus on a problem, it's not the real problem. It's not the real problem.
There you go. Well, the real problem that they had to hide. Are y'all still there?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was afraid I'd lost you. The real thing they had to hide was Hillary's dad was the head of the mob in Chicago. He and Rostenkowski, Dan Rostenkowski, took over when what's his name, Capone, got put in jail. Nobody knew that. I mean, that was one of the most top secrets in the world. And it was because of that, Bill latched on to her because he saw the ties that they had and that, they could help him win. She comes from a criminal background. So does he.
Mm-hmm. So my research takes me into northern Arkansas, where the Whitewater parcel was. And my understanding is that there was a large amount of trapped, landlocked lumber parcels that needed to get sold. And inside Arkansas, businessmen, maybe backed by the Stevens, maybe not, would stand up and say, look, we'll buy 2,000 acres of this trap stuff. And then they rely on Bill Clinton or some other politician to have a road go in. And then they chop the land up into smaller parcels. And Whitewater was just one of those small parcels. There were several multi-thousand acre deals.
Mm-hmm.
And in those investments, my research suggests that not perhaps too dissimilar from the way life works in Washington, D.C., powerful politicians like Fulbright, Senator Fulbright, would invest in these deals, these land flipping deals. Is that your recollection?
Pretty much. Now, you remember McClellan was Clinton's dad. That's his real dad.
But McClellan...
So he always had... Yes, not Fulbright, McClellan. McClellan always watching over his shoulder. That's how he got his scholarship. That's how he got his Rhodes Scholarship, et cetera, et cetera. But the scam they were using, I found out on Whitewater, is they were using property, selling what looked like selling property, taking in cash, which guess what? Ended up eventually, it came from Mena, Arkansas. It was a way to bag and sack money. And then supposedly all this stuff was down at McDougal's Bank or Savings and Loan. Well, when the surprise inspectors came, all of this Whitewater property and everything didn't really exist. Nobody really bought any. They couldn't find anybody that bought it. They couldn't find any money that was supposed to have been paid for it.
Well, what my research is a little bit different than that. My understanding is that they would sell lots in a strange transactional form that's not allowed in New York, for example, where you would sign up to buy the lot and you would have, let's say, 60 monthly payments, but you didn't get title on the property until you paid off every single payment. And most every purchaser failed to complete the installment purchase. So that the angle here is that you would say you sold it, you would take in the cash, but you would never declare it as income, and you would resell time after time after time. And
well, that was going on as well. That was the cover showing transactions.
Mm-hmm. And when you read, there are various books. There's a book by Kim Eisler, and there's about the firm Williams and Connolly. There are other books that suggest that David Kendall, the top partner at Williams and Connolly, who's been helpful in covering this all up and obstructing any real justice here, he knew all about this. He did his homework, and they were fighting like crazy to make sure that Jeff Girth, who did the Whitewater stories for New York Times in 1992, never really got to the bottom of the real story.
That's right. As a matter of fact, I was the one McDougal called from prison and said they're withholding my medicine. Can you come get my manuscript?
Wow.
I said, I didn't know you had one. Well, the next day he was dead.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Did you get the manuscript?
Nope. The guy that did the writing for him got it.
Who was that did the writing?
I can't remember his name. I mean, it didn't mean anything to me.
Did that book ever come out?
I don't think it did. Maybe it did. I don't know.
There is a McDougall book, and there's a book by his wife, Susan.
Uh-huh.
I have that. I have Bloodsport. I have Susan's book. If you make it smaller there, Jason, the next one down.
Oh, yeah.
That's an interesting one. Oh, yeah, here it is. Jim McDougall and Curtis Wilkie, Arkansas Mischief.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Curtis Wilkie was the guy who did the writing.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yep, he's the one that got it.
Because it's really interesting. You know, so many of these people have written books, and they tend to go over the same subjects. And by so many of these people, I mean Bill Clinton, Hillary, Chelsea's written, many people have written, Webb Hubbell. And, you know, you have to have a lot of time in your hands to read them all. But when you read them, you find stunning contradictions that tend to expose the real truth.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one thing about, you know, his pathological line. You got to keep your story straight, which he could, but Hubbell and them couldn't.
Yeah. Well, now, when you were working with Bill, you got reasonably close to him, right? You spent time with him?
I'm sorry, what?
When you were working around Bill in Arkansas, did you ever spend time alone with him where he would let down his hair and tell you what he was?
Oh, yeah, all the time. Yes.
Did he ever explain why he went to Georgetown?
No. I know what he told me about the Rhodes Scholar.
What did he tell you about that?
He went for a week and then left and went to Russia. Stayed the rest of the time.
A week?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did he ever mention to you there are these two brothers? I think it's Dave and Mike Edwards. And Dave, I believe, or it could have been Mike, was at the time Bill had his Rhodes, he was working for Citibank in London. And he would, like Epstein, he would hold parties for young people in London. And Bill, in his book, I call it My Lies, he calls it My Life. But in his book, he talks about how he would, was it Ed Edwards, sorry. Ed and Mark. And he would come down to London and he would attend these different parties. And it was this guy as well who, after Bill and Hillary were married, Bill claims that Ed Edwards, a week after they got back for their first honeymoon, said, listen, I want to take you to Haiti, and took Hillary and Bill down to Haiti. Bill claims using frequent flyer miles, which when you do your research, and I've done a lot of deals in the airline industry in the past, there were no frequent flyer miles that gave you free tickets in 1975.
Right.
So that's Bill's book.
Well, I didn't know those guys. I never heard of them, or if I did, I never paid any attention to it.
But so
Bill
you think
listen, Bill was hobnobbing with people like that all over the country, in England. I mean, Canada. I mean, he just hobnobbed, and somehow they knew when they were throwing these parties that he would come, and he would come.
Mm-hmm. Now, we have had people tell us, Jason and me, that Bill was kicked out of Oxford.
No.
You don't think so?
Well, I don't know. He said he didn't get kicked out, that he just quit, just left. Didn't even quit, he just left. Now, you'll notice that he became, because I was the one going around the country, was running for president, saying, you know, they was calling him a Rhodes Scholar, and I was saying, no, he's not. No, he's not. I kept telling everybody, no, he's not. Well, it was only after he was elected that they gave him an honorary Rhodes Scholar.
But he was in that
No,
program, wasn't he?
It's slightly different than that. He was admitted as a Rhodes Scholar, definitely. However, back in those days, I'm 64 now, and so Bill's almost 10 years older than I am. Back in those days when he got the Rhodes Scholarship, we still had the Vietnam War. And there would have been a risk, if he didn't hold his place, that he would have had to actually fight. So volunteering to leave the Rhodes Scholarship was a very risky thing to do. And indeed, back in 68 through 70, when he was there, you got a large monthly stipend beyond your tuition, which was paid, and you didn't have to go to class. And for a relatively smart guy like Bill, why would you ever leave such a setup?
Well, because he had McClellan. McClellan wouldn't let him go. There was no way Bill would face Vietnam. No way. Not to mention the fact that I think it was Colonel Blakely, who was the recruiter in that area. Bill sent him a letter you can get a copy of off the internet.
Yep, saying he was going to law school or the reserves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And Bill politely told him, no, thank you, I got to go. I'm going to college or whatever.
Yeah. So we have contacts who will remain nameless for the moment, who were on the inside at Oxford and were able to confirm for us that he indeed was kicked out. And
that would explain why he left.
Yeah. And evidently the incident involved somebody who went on to become a senior professor type at Oxford who did not want the story to come out while she was still working there. And of course, Oxford is like, Yale Law School or any of these endowed colleges. They're all far left. So they're all in for globalism. So, I know a little bit about the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, but why don't you, if you can take a second, why don't you explain what that entity is?
Arkansas Development Finance Authority was a quasi-state agency, the only one of its kind in Arkansas. As a matter of fact, it may have been the only one, I can't remember, it may have been the only one of its kind in the United States. And what they would do when they were doing something that they needed the full faith and credit of the state of Arkansas to pull off, they would be the state agency. When it came time for somebody to look into some of these quote unquote humongous bond loans that they were making, well, then it was a private agency, and they could, you weren't allowed to look into the records.
Mm-hmm.
Now that was the premise in the beginning. What they would do is with Dan Lassiter, they would set up these bond issues. Lassiter would get straw people that didn't even know that this was going on. He would use straw people to buy parts of the bond issue, to buy blocks of it. The money that he would get coming in from MENA, he would run through ADFA to be cleaned.
Right.
And I mean, it was something. It was something to behold, buddy. And there I was right in the middle of it.
Yeah, and it seems to be a long-standing pattern and practice with these Clintons, and not just with the Clintons, with the Bushes too, that you and Obama and others, you come up with these projects that on paper sound fantastic, and the newspaper people are in the newspaper business, the media business, because they don't know how to count, they don't understand arithmetic, but they know how to write. So they say, oh yeah, this is great. We're going to provide affordable housing or climate change remediation, you name it. Yeah, let's give this thing $300 million. So you raise the $300 million, and the money finally comes into the whatever treasury, and the insiders say, Jason, how much do you want? You say, I'll take 50.
That's right.
That's
right.
Larry, how much do you want? Well, I'll take 75. Charles, how much do you want? I'll take everything else.
Well, Well, that's about how it went. That ADFA would go out and find, well, they wouldn't go out. People would come to ADFA wanting these bond issues that were supposed to be for schools and churches. Well, people would come in with businesses, privately owned, that wanted to get a bond issue to help grow their business. Well, what would happen was, let's say you needed $700,000 to do the expansion you want to do. Wooten Epps would tell you, well, here's what I need you to do. We'll okay you getting $700,000, but you're going to borrow $750,000. And then the guy would say, well, I can't pay back that. Well, you don't have to worry about paying back any of it. It's all going to be taken care of. But that $50,000 goes to the campaign coffers of Clinton.
Right. Right.
Now, by the way, the FBI out of Memphis office verified everything I'm telling you.
Yeah.
But they never did anything with it.
Well, not only did they not do anything with it, they allowed the Clintons and the people around the Clintons to expand the playing field. This was done in Arkansas by 93 January when they got to D.C. Suddenly they were able to do this same kind of criminal financing across the United States and ultimately around the world after Bill Clinton expanded his, in quotes, charity.
Yep. I don't know about the Clinton Foundation, but I have a strong feeling that it set up projects like ADFA. I just have a feeling. I could be wrong.
You're exactly right. And they did it through the Clinton Global Initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And so the standard approach, it's interesting, and I'm not saying one state is better than another. Certainly we had in New York, Tammany Hall. We have Mayor de Blasio running the place now, and billions go missing every year. So I'm not trying to say in any way that New York is better than Arkansas or, all these politicians are crooked. And the standard approach is, as I say, you articulate the need for money for some project. I'm going to stop the killing of innocent children. And all of a sudden, half the electorate says, okay, give Charles $50 billion. And then, the crooks say, well, you don't want a check. It would be an insult to his integrity to ask him to explain to you what happened to the $50 billion. And that's what these Clintons have been doing. I mean, you're probably familiar with the Gillette, Arkansas raccoon dinner.
Yep.
Yeah, Bill writes about that in his book.
Have you been to that, Larry?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good Lord, yes. Anybody went to that.
Is it really roadkill they serve?
I'm sorry, what?
Bill says in his book, which probably means it's false, that the meat that is served at that dinner is roadkill.
Well, that's the joke. That's the joke of the event. That to make you kind of balk at eating, but it wasn't roadkill. I mean, there were several. Right, there were several farmers and people that provided the meat, and and they killed it and brought it in, cut it up, and cleaned it. But I was told I was told that everybody that brought in meat, they had to have one leg, I think, still connected to prove that it was not roadkill.
The farmer or the meat?
But if you think about it, the premise for that. Sorry, you go ahead, Larry.
Well, but the thing is, I mean, there was other stuff like hot dogs and hamburgers, and then there was raccoon, and not many people dined on the raccoon.
Got it.
Right. But as Bill writes about it in his book, he explains that the premise of the gathering is that if you're if you have political aspirations in Arkansas, you have to show up at that dinner or whatever it is, that meal, and way more people than you needed to support the local school in Gillette show up. And nobody really counts what happens to that money or why you need year after year after year to have this event to help support the sports activities in that local place. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
What they did there was just like at a speaking event. All right. When Bill would speak at some place, at the end of his talk, people would come up and they would hand Larry Patterson, his security guard, or Roger Perry, they would hand them envelopes or cash to give to the governor for his campaign. Well, they never reported any of that.
Right.
They didn't have to report it. There's no way to do that. Well, that was the same thing. And it was historic with the dinner that you're talking about in Gillette. I mean, that was famous among politicians going back years. I mean, it was just a way to get people to chunk in money, and nobody ever reported it.
Exactly. And so they did it with political campaigns at first. They also did it with Bill Clinton's Birthplace Foundation, which I think was put together in 1991.
Mm-hmm.
And they started doing it, the same approach with not-for-profits.
Right.
And curious what you think about the process for raising money for the Little Rock Library.
I don't know. I don't know what to think. I know it was shady, but I wasn't involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of isolated from that.
Yeah, because what's interesting to me, I've spent a lot of time on it now, is I think this project to articulate the need for money to redevelop a portion of a city and put in a charity is a tactic that the Bushes used for the Texas Rangers Stadium. That was a for-profit operation. George W. Bush did not have the money he needed to pay for his general partnership interest to purchase the Texas Rangers. And the people around that buyout of the Texas Rangers had an interest in redeveloping the stadium for the Texas Rangers. So Bush was really a pawn in a much larger project that netted him a $15 million return ultimately, but netted the people behind the Texas Rangers project hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. So by 1997, the day before Bill and Hillary, it's reported, selected the site for the foundation, on November 6th, Bill and Hillary were at the George H.W. Bush Foundation dedication in Texas. And ultimately, the same person who handled the transition from the National Archives of the records of the Bush first presidency, that same person did the same job for Bill and Hillary Clinton.
That's the way it works.
Yeah. And like anything else, people don't like to ask the really big questions, but the big questions I have about this include, are we sure that the Elder Bush Library houses all the records of that Bush presidency? And I will tell you, I'm very sure it does not house all the records. That records that were made...
I would almost guarantee it doesn't.
Yeah. And in the same way, Bill used this person who I think allowed Bush records to disappear to oversee the transfer of his records from Washington, D.C., ultimately to the library. But the timing is interesting. Bill leaves the White House January 20th, 2001. They don't break ground on the building until May of 2002.
But that's not Scooter Libby putting the plans in his underwear, is it?
A different guy, not Scooter Libby. It's the name will come to me, but it's not Scooter Libby. Yeah. So what they did, Larry, maybe you're familiar with this, maybe you're not, is the Clinton White House and the archivist at the time Bill was still president allowed Bill to transfer much of his records to a former car dealership in Little Rock that was supervised, in theory, by the same person who did the Elder Bush Library transfer. and the records were stored there at a car dealership. But we're talking about, millions of pages.
You're talking. Yeah, that car dealership was Matt McClarty's.
Was it really?
Yeah, and he was his chief of staff in the beginning.
Interesting. And at the same time, it's McClarty, Jason. But that at the same time, in 2001, are you aware that the library purchased land that had been owned by the Clinton family in Hot Springs?
Go figure.
And Bill writes about that in his book. He admits it. He says, on page 33 of his book, and I only remember that because Jason likes this 33 number, and he's taught me to remember that if something happens with a 33, it's important. But on page 33, Bill says that in 2001, some member of his family had died, and he and his stepbrother and I think his cousins together had an interest in this plot of land, and it was kind of a rundown Camp David in Hot Springs. And he writes and he says, we didn't want to see it go to anybody else. And fortunately, quote, my foundation had the money to buy that land in Hot Springs. But that's strictly illegal.
Yeah. But that doesn't bother them.
Not surprising.
Yeah.
No, you've got to remember, guys, the rule of thumb that you have to use with the Clintons. Who you going to call? I mean, if you discover the biggest crime that they've committed on earth, who you going to call?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when he became president, he controlled the CIA, FBI, IRS, Secret Service, you name it. So whatever somebody brought up against him, it would be toast. One of the first things Bill did was he fired every federal prosecutor in the country one time. And when I think there were 11 that weren't done. And then they replaced them with Hillary in charge of picking the replacements.
Right.
Wow. Hillary in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's actually the books I was referring to. I mean, she more or less admits that. And Hillary was functioning as the de facto Attorney General of the United States, though she did not have formally that title, until Janet Reno ultimately was finally brought across the line. And once she was brought across the line, she was instructed by Bill Clinton to fire all 93 U.S. attorneys, which she did.
She did.
Now,
why? Because if you were going to bring a suit against the Clintons or somebody they like, nationally, you have to go through the federal prosecutor, his office, and all the Clintons had to do is just snub it there.
Right. Prosecutorial discretion.
Yeah, or just lose it in their desk somewhere.
Yeah.
Because I assure you, many of them, if you went and asked them and said, well, whatever happened to the complaint by such and such, we know it was delivered here on such and such date, then they'll break into this dumbness. Gosh, we had a fire. I guess that's when it burned.
Was it a fire or a flood?
Yeah, something. They'll come up with something. Matter of fact, Bill Rempel from the Los Angeles Times, he got very frustrated because I would tell him things about Clinton's campaign funds in Arkansas, how he raised them and stuff. Well, he got very frustrated because he went to the Capitol and asked for Bill Clinton's campaign logs from his campaigns going back to his first one. Now, you got to remember, the state capitol, they had Justice Jim Johnson's filings when he ran. And that was in the 50s. All right. So 50s and 60s. And they had those records. Well, Rempel finally got mad and said, how on earth can you not have them? They said, well, there must have been a fire. And then the girl said, no, that's right. There was a fire. And those records were burned. And his records were burned, but Jim Johnson's weren't.
Right. Printed on asbestos paper, Larry.
I'm telling you.
So just to go back for a minute, when Bill Clinton told you that he was in the Soviet Union after a week in Oxford, what more did he say about that? I mean, isn't it incredibly strange that some hippie loser teenager could travel to the Soviet Union in the late 1960s? I mean, that's like if I told you I went to Mars or something, isn't it?
You didn't?
Yeah, well, he told me he just caught a bus. Caught a train.
A train?
But you'd have to get a visa at that time.
Yeah.
He didn't. He said he didn't. He just got a train, got on the train, rode right in.
Yeah.
Something about that
and
story
he considered, yeah. And then what he did was he claimed by studying Russia that was furthering his education. And nobody, not me, not anybody, knows what he did when he was in there.
Right.
Somebody knows.
Somebody knows.
And it's probably very much in the Russian KGB files.
I'm going to bet.
Well, it's also interesting.
Which is probably where this whole Russian thing to Trump came from.
Yeah.
Remember, the Clintons always accuse you of doing what they do.
Right.
Yeah.
So that way they know all the ins and outs and can make it look like they really busted a scoop on you.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it odd that they used Russia to go after Trump?
Yeah. The other thing I find odd, Larry, is that, when you research the history of Lee Harvey Oswald, he also traveled to the Soviet Union at a time when it was pretty unlikely that a marginally employed teenage guy could do that. And yet they both went there, almost nothing known about it, lots of weird stuff surrounding both of them.
Right.
Strange.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were thinking about Trump being some kind of Russian agent, then Clinton would have had the biggest connection to that of anybody, because he literally went and stayed there.
Yeah.
How do we know he didn't come back a Russian agent or a Soviet spy or whatever?
Yeah, I think maybe he did. Gave all that info to China.
Yeah.
Yep, maybe he did.
Yeah, and of course the project, the Anglo-American project, really the Rhodes Project, of creating or encouraging grasping, ambitious political types to form an informal and unholy alliance promoting the UN and globalist causes at the expense of nationalism. This has been going on for decades. And you can imagine why the former Soviet Union and oligarchs in it would like that program as well. They're threatened in numbers by China, by India, to sort of break down the fabric of the United States and the United Kingdom, and then get as much dirt as possible, which was not hard in the case of Bill Clinton, or for that matter, Barack Obama. It's a tactic, I think, that these people have been employing for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll assure you, Bill Clinton was overly fond of the communist people.
Really?
Or the government. Yeah, truly.
What makes you say that?
That's just him. Just the things he did during his tenure as president. I can't tell you any of them right now, but it all falls in about like giving the power thing, the nuclear power thing, to North Korea to a generator. They did the same thing with stuff with Russia.
Yeah, it really is true that when you look at, say, January 20th, or look at 1992, and look at the power of the United States, look at the economic statistics, and look at the Soviet Union, which blew up in 1992, and then look at all the concessions that Bill Clinton made to the communist Chinese, to the Russians, and to others, and then look at the oligarchs around the world who flourished because of those concessions, and then look how much of that money went back to the Clintons, the Bushes, and their allies. Straight up corruption.
Yeah, and see, that's the key to it all. They go out, they find somebody that they think they can trust, or usually by getting into some monetary arrangement, they get them to where they can't lie about it or tell the truth. But they get somebody, funnel money to them, and then next thing you know, money comes back to them.
In all this, did you ever run into Skip Rutherford?
Sure did, a lot.
What's your impression of him?
He's a gadfly.
Because
he was just a guy that wanted to be a big wig and just kept playing the field until he got to be one.
Because wasn't he was in politics? He had various staff jobs for the Clintons and for, I think, David Pryor. But he got into this PR business. Was it Cranford, Johnson, Robinson, Woods, or something like that?
Right, Cranford, Johnson, Hunt, yes.
Yep. And in that capacity, he was a big booster, I think, for promoting the redevelopment of the city of Little Rock.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And do we have a sense that he, on a scale of 100 is completely honest and 0 is completely dishonest, does he fit on the scale?
I would put him at about a 20.
We've got a picture of him on screen.
I know him well. I mean, he would go around, and wherever there was a board position for something, he'd get Clinton to appoint to it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm saying. He was just Mr. Big Shot. He was on every board of everything in the state nearly.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't do anything.
We've got a picture of him here. He looks like the Joker from Batman.
Yeah.
The thing is, talk about minutes and notes. In the age of the internet, there's now a lot of information online, and you can't scrub it all. In fact, it's too late to scrub the information that a big team of people around the world has. And some of that information shows, for example, Rutherford basically committing felony crimes on a daily basis, and not covering many of them up in the connection with this attempted organization of the Clinton Foundation.
Was that bad?
It was pretty bad.
Should he have not done that?
He should not have done that. No. And
I wouldn't doubt that at all. I wasn't involved, but I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah. And who would you say might be the monetary mastermind behind this? Because I don't think it's Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton.
No. It's Jack and Whit Stevens.
You think so?
Yeah.
And of course, they're also quite close to the Bushes.
That's right.
Same tactics, different parties, different states.
Yeah, I mean, look, as rich as they were, as many holdings as they had around the nation and the world, you always wanted to keep one foot in both places, so you always recovered.
Mm-hmm. And how about...
I promise you, they were the financial gurus that backed everything Clinton did.
Yeah. And how about Bruce Lindsay?
Bruce, how do you describe him? He's a cool cat. Mm-hmm. He really enjoyed playing the role of being a big gun with Clinton. Mm-hmm. He didn't do anything, but he just, every chance he could, he was always with Clinton. Even up till in time he was president. Mm-hmm. If you ever saw Clinton playing golf, Lindsay was around somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because for all this talk, I mean, Hillary's on lists of the 20 best lawyers in the world or in America, and Bill is always described
she never tried a case.
and Bill is always described as being intelligent, but there's several books I read. There's one where he was driving Fulbright around and infuriated Fulbright, and when Bill was just like an intern level guy. And Fulbright spoke in this book on the record, very negatively about Bill.
Uh-huh.
So
I wouldn't doubt it. I would not doubt it. I think Fulbright was about half jealous of Bill because of McClellan picking him up under his wing. You could not touch Clinton because of McClellan.
Mm-hmm.
Larry, what about this picture? I think you and I have probably spoken about it on our show, but this picture of Bill Clinton hanging out with George H.W. Bush, and is it George Wallace? I mean, it looks like they've been good friends for decades.
Yeah, I don't think that picture's real.
Really?
Mm-mm.
Why do you say that?
I just don't.
Huh.
Snopes says it is.
Huh?
That's good.
Snopes, which is not terribly reliable, says it is.
I know. I mean, it could be. I just don't think it's real. I don't think you can put Clinton and Bush and Wallace together due to the time span. But maybe he could. I mean, he'd had to have been a real young kid.
He's young in the picture.
Yeah. I mean, real young, though.
Well,
I don't think it's real, but it may be. I'm just telling you, I don't think it's real.
Right.
So maybe an expert on the cans there and the packaging.
Right, the soda cans, yeah. Drinking Mountain Dew and Diet Pepsi.
So what do you think, knowing the Clintons as well as you do, and looking at where we are in the political process with this election coming, how do you foresee what's going to happen to Biden among Democrats? Is Hillary going to rear her head again?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. When she lost to Trump, you see, that set the Democrats back. They had the country in the barrel. They had it. And they were going to be able to move with all these progressive agendas. Everything was going to roll just like clockwork. And she fiddle-farted around and lost to Trump. And when she did that, in her rise to fame, she stepped on a lot of people, guys. Mm-hmm. A lot of them. And when she lost some of the power, the people she had stepped on has put her down. So I don't think she could get in if she wanted to. She wants to, but I don't think she can get in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Democrats, I have no idea what they're going to do with Biden. I mean, he's problematic. Now, what they're going to do is what they're doing. They're going to keep him in what I guess you call a bunker, not let him talk anymore, not let him go out in public, with any sizable group where the media can query him or whatever. They're going to keep him down and let surrogates talk for him.
Yeah.
And they're putting off the debate. They're putting off the debates until after the time that sending in absentee ballots is cut off. So you might see the debate and go, my God, this guy's a buffoon. I'm not going to vote for him. Well, by that time, if you voted for him, you've already voted for him and you can't do anything about it.
I don't know if you've seen the photo, Larry, but he's got a really nicely finished basement. I think he needs a foosball game and an air hockey table down there, and then why would he leave?
Don't know, buddy. Don't know.
But in my experience in business, unless the product you're selling is illegal and addictive, it's never going to work too well for you to not speak about the attributes of your product, not have your product go out to the marketplace, not promote your product, allow your product to say really stupid things. It just doesn't work so well in business.
Well, you're right. You're right in normal times. These are not normal times. Look, all they're counting on with Biden, they just need to shut him up because the votes they need to win, they're going to keep pumping the people that hate Trump.
Mm-hmm.
If they can get all the people that hate Trump to get off their duff and go vote, then you take all the Democrats, the hardcore Democrats, and they vote. They figure they've got the point spread to win. Now, that's the reason they're doing it, and it's just a different time. It's a different time and place, I swear.
But what's your take on how Arkansas will vote in this? Are they going to vote for Biden, or are they going to vote for Trump?
Trump. It'll be Trump all the way.
Uh-huh. And is your governor, Asa Hutchinson, is he a good guy?
You bet.
Uh-huh.
Yep. He's a Republican from Northwest Arkansas. He was Jack Witt Stevens' boy when he was up there as a representative.
So the Stevens, they're still really controlling the politics over there. It's kind of amazing. I don't know if there's another analog in a state other than Arkansas where one, or is there, Charles?
Well, back in the day, you would say, J.P. Morgan in America. I mean, the individual, or you might say more recently, David Rockefeller, who both are now dead. But Arkansas is an interesting state from a finance standpoint because Stevens' operation is so big in a state that's relatively small. Stevens has influenced the family and the bank far beyond the state of Arkansas.
Oh, absolutely. It was the largest investment firm outside of Wall Street in the country.
Yeah. And we noticed, you'll get a chuckle about this, we noticed as we were preparing, Jason went to Google Earth, and we were talking about hot springs, and Jason discovered that one of the features of hot springs is there's the Gangster Museum of America is in hot springs.
Yep, Capone and all of them used to go down there and frequent and get in the hot tubs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And apparently that's not far away from a Bill Clinton park.
Not far at all. Certainly not far from his mother.
Yeah.
Wow. Appropriately located, I would say.
It actually looks pretty nice at street level.
Yeah, let me tell you, back in those days, Hot Springs was wide open, buddy.
How do you mean?
I mean, everything. Gambling, hookers, everything. It was just wide open.
Huh.
And then Rockefeller got in, the prude that he was, and he went and had all the slot machines picked up, and they dumped them in the, I don't know if it's the Washita River or which one, but anyway, they just took them and dumped them into the river.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's very environmentally sound.
No. But that's the way it went. And then Hot Springs has been in the penalty box ever since, with the exception of the racetrack. The racetrack has been allowed to keep going and to allow betting.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Now, Jim and Diane Blair, were they in Hot Springs or Fayetteville?
Fayetteville, I think.
Fayetteville, yeah. Did you ever run into them?
No. If I did, I didn't pay them any attention. I mean, they were never anything to me.
Uh-huh. And how about Vince Foster?
Oh, yeah, with him a lot. And Patterson and Perry tell a funny story that whenever Bill would leave, to go somewhere downtown or to some meeting, he'd pull out, and here would come Vince's car. Vince would sneak in like Clouseau in the whatever. He would just pop in, and then they'd get a call that Bill was on his way back. They'd call the main house, and out would go Foster, and in would come Bill.
Huh.
So this supports the theories that people have said that Vince Foster and Hillary Clinton had some kind of romantic relationship, as unappetizing as that sounds.
Oh, yeah, they did. Yeah, they did for years, and everybody knew it. That wasn't a secret.
And it's a theory that basically after Bill won and it became necessary to file a tax return for 1992 for the Clintons as president, the stories in multiple books suggest that it was Vince Foster's job to look through those records and to assist in filing the return. And he just concluded that he couldn't do it, and either was killed or killed himself. That is one theory.
Yeah, that's a theory. don't know that I hold much water with it. The main theory I go by is when Bill got elected president, Hillary didn't need Vince anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And she discarded him like a dish rag. But he really loved her. And
What was it?
But anyway, he didn't kill himself.
Right. What was it, Larry, that Hillary would have needed Vince Foster for prior to that? Stuff at Rose Law Firm?
The Rose Law Firm. Keeping her in there, keeping her in the business, even though she didn't litigate any cases.
Mm-hmm. Do you know anything about the relationship between the Clintons and Christopher Ruddy? It seems like Ruddy wrote a really far-reaching and in-depth book about the death of Vince Foster, and then suddenly he's buddies with the Clintons and they're sending money to Newsmax.
That one got me, buddy, because I was with him from the very beginning when he was with the Pittsburgh Tribune, and he came to me and we started breaking stories. Then he went in and opened his own thing, and then he was a major investigator into the death of Vince Foster and everything that I was able to give him. And then all of a sudden, a while back, I don't know how long ago it was, I saw him on television talking about how bad he felt about doing that to the Clintons.
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw up.
Yeah, because the information...
Chris, Chris has got a publication that he's got to keep in business, so I guess it'd be more profitable to talk good about the Clintons now than to keep talking bad about them. I don't know. I can't explain that one.
Same thing happened with Dave Brock.
Right. That's what I was going to say. To what extent, Larry, have you observed the Clintons sort of... I mean, it seems to me Christopher Ruddy presented the most comprehensive evidence in the Vince Foster death. So to what extent would the Clintons or people acting on their behalf go to somebody like that and say, hey, in this hand we have 1.5 million, in this hand we have your death certificate, which would you like?
Or your suicide note.
It was about like that. I mean, they would send surrogates, and these surrogates would, depending on who was the surrogate that had the connection to the person they were trying to shut up or stop, whatever. And it was simple, we can help you grow your business, etc. We'll destroy you.
Right.
And then don't forget about all the bodies that are hanging around. We're not saying anybody's going to hurt you, but it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the story was Bill's got a lot of loyal supporters, and they don't like people that hurt him. And, intimating that these loyal supporters about to kill him.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. I, through the course of doing this work, both before I met Jason and now with Jason, I've met a lot of people, including people who are senior in the Democratic Party. And I'm assured by some, and who are quite credible, that they loathe the Clintons. And, and so I hope, maybe nothing's happening with Durham and Barr on these quotes investigations, but I sure hope that the tide is turning now, and that Democrats will realize that it's time to put a stake through the heart of the Clintons and their corruption.
That's exactly the only thing that'll work with the Clintons. You're going to have to put a stake in their heart, because they will come back. They keep coming back.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah.
Now, do we want to get into any conversation about either Strobe Talbot or Cody Shearer, Derek Shearer? What do you think about those guys, Larry?
Well, Strobe Talbot was just a player. He was in a lot of investments. He was in and out of a lot of things, and he was just a buddy of the Clintons.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't he one of Bill's roommates or something in college?
He was.
Uh-huh. And was it you who told me that they had some kind of romantic relationship?
No. That's not who he had the romantic thing with. That was a guy at the Rhodes Collar place in London.
Really?
having a stroke. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember who that was?
Yeah. I talked to him. I mean, he remembered things that only if you'd have been there, you could have known. So he was cleared in my book.
Yeah, because if you go back to Bill's book, and who knows who actually wrote that lengthy book, it's 1,000 pages long with tiny type, but he talks about the early period when he was at Rhodes Scholarship, going through dark periods in his life, and questioning who he was and what was important to him, et cetera, which would be consistent with experimentation along the lines you are alluding to.
Yeah, I mean, and Bill told me he did. They didn't like it, but he did. Had to try it.
Bill told you he tried it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Sure.
I mean, that certainly fits with the whole Weather Underground. I mean, there's a lot of similarities, really, when we think about it, between Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, these mysterious holes in their timeline, whole concept of being essentially a traitor to the United States of America.
Speaking as a parent, looking at this picture that Jason has of the young bearded Bill Clinton and the young Coke-bottled glasses Hillary Clinton, I don't know which set of parents should be more upset when this couple showed up for the first time at either parent's house. I
mean, yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, and Larry, you've told us a lot of stuff about Hillary Clinton. I meant to bring this up on a show we did yesterday. Bishop Larry Gators was talking about how, I forget the woman's name, but she was named the Witch of Los Angeles by the mayor or something. There's a whole city certificate. And you've told us, Larry, in previous shows that you used to drive Hillary to these witches' coven meetings in Los Angeles. It felt like some kind of connection to me.
Now, we would have to pay for her trip from the ADFA Travel Fund to go out there to the witches' things with Linda Bloodworth Thompson.
She's a witch as well?
Yeah. I don't know what witches are, but she went with Hillary, or Hillary went with her. And of course, she was married to Harry Thompson, the big producer out there for Columbia.
Right.
And later, she started her own thing called Designing Women.
Yeah, yeah. And they were, of course, very much involved in the whole travel scandal.
Mm-hmm.
Which,
sure were.
As somebody who's done a lot of travel and knows how much it costs, both retail and wholesale, I'm struck in the Clinton Foundation when you look into the peak years when they were really bloated across all their operations. They were spending in some years close to $20 million a year on travel. That's hard to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, not if you charter, DC 727s, charter them just for your people and go to Africa and have them sit around and then take you back. I mean, now I can see it just by the extravagant way they traveled and the fact that they took so many people when they would go.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. In 2002, in September, Bill and Epstein and an entourage of actors and other crazies went to Africa on Epstein 727. And the Epstein claimed that he funded that. That would be, in my language, that would be a non-cash donation. So under IRS rules, which of course apply to ordinary mortals, but not to the Clintons, you're supposed to declare any non-cash donations that you might have received in 2002 or every year. And the Clinton Foundation says for 2002, we got nothing. And nonetheless, they spend a fair amount of money on travel in 2002, and it goes way up from there.
Mm-hmm.
So the question, so the question is, what travel agency would the Clintons likely have been using? They must have some travel agency they could trust.
They used Linda Bloodworth Thompson. I think her daughter was the travel person. Now, I don't know. Don't get me lying. I remember it, but I can't remember specifics. But
Sure.
they had it in the house, essentially, in the family group. So,
Yeah.
well, gentlemen, I've got to bust off. My wife's waiting on me to eat. So please forgive me.
No, that's all right.
Thanks for taking so much time.
Yep.
Hey, you bet, guys. It's been fun.
Absolutely. Good to speak to you again, Larry, and we'll talk to you again on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, we'll be there. See ya.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care, Larry.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well, there you go, Charles.
That's great.
First conversation with the great Larry Nichols. I do want to remind everybody, Larry has just recently been through quite a bit, and I hope that people will visit nicholslive.com. You can click on the donate tab, and that's going to give you all the information that you need to send Larry some financial support. You can use PayPal, and with Larry's PayPal address, nicholslive@aol.com, you can send him some money, financial contribution of your choice. You can also put some money into an envelope and mail it to him in Conway, Arkansas. How'd you feel about that conversation, Charles?
I think it was very good, very timely, and thanks for arranging it.
Yeah.
He's quite a character.
I think people are pleased to see you guys compare notes. Did we learn anything material that you think will help in your investigation?
Yeah, I think I'll be ruminating on what he said and going back and checking my notes, and maybe we'll have another conversation. I do think a lot has happened since Sunday. Maybe we should comment on a few of the stories that we didn't get into. I'd start, with this Biden not going to attend the Milwaukee event. I mean, this is just stunning to me. I mean, who said, the most important part of succeeding in life is showing up?
That was my NYU film professor.
Oh, but it's somebody before that said that as well.
That was the first thing. He said the first rule of filmmaking is show up.
Exactly.
And I was like, that makes sense.
I took that to heart, actually, when I did my first, in the business line, my first interview on September 16th, 2008, I decided that I wanted to, if I was going to do anything, I wanted to have a reputation for reliably showing up, ready to go. Yeah. So I would always, typically, I try to show up 15 minutes to 30 minutes before the hit. And it helps. Producers tell you after they get to know you, well, we like having you on because we don't have to worry about whether you're going to show up.
Right.
But this idea that you're going to say, well, here's my plan, okay? I've got 46 years, this is the way he talks, he's got to always do it. I have 46 years experience in politics, screwing everything up I try, and everyone around me gets rich in my family, only if you're in my family. So here's the deal. Listen, Fat, what I'm going to do is instead of saying, I'm going to put together a pool of the most talented potential VP candidates drawn from across the world. No, I can't do that. They have to be American. Drawn from across, no, I can't do that. They have to be Democrats. Drawn from across the Democratic Party. And I'm going to only pick the strongest possible vice president. And I'm going to get that job done because I can get it done on my terms by August 1st. Instead of saying that, he says, I'm only going to appoint a black woman as my vice president, but I'm going to get that done by August 1st.
So, wait a minute. Not August 1st.
Yeah, then it's, I need another week.
Well, what else is he doing? Why? I mean,
well, let me keep going. So, I need another week. Now I need another 2 weeks. I mean, this is somebody who believes he has the system greased. Rules don't apply to him because they didn't apply to Barack Obama. They're going to stuff the election anyway in his mind. And, to now say, I'm not going to go. I mean, think about Joe Biden. If anybody is going to be protected and kept away from anybody who might have the coronavirus, you would hope it would be Joe Biden.
Yeah.
So if he's looked at the situation with his feeble mind and decided he can't, it's too risky for him, who's so well protected, to attend this convention, why would anyone go? Why would anyone care? And let me ask that question. Why does anyone care what this oaf has to say? I mean, the caption under this should be his campaign motto, right? I got nothing.
Did I leave
nothing.
the oven on?
What?
Did I leave the oven on?
I mean, and then, it's not like the guy has a great relationship with the key for Democrats voting bloc of African Americans. He goes on this show, and I don't know if you've seen this story, but he goes on the show, interview show, and I think it was a mainstream reporter. I don't know if you can pull it up. Just put in Biden and junkie, and you should get to the story. And the African American reporter, I think from a mainstream operation, I think it's like NBC. Let's see, if you go down the page a little bit.
So bad that he said that.
But a CBS correspondent. Okay,
Wow.
So you're not talking about One American News or Fox News or India Today or whatever. You're talking about
Whoa. It's worse than you described.
I know.
He said that's like saying to you before you got on this program if you had taken a test where you'd taken cocaine or not.
What do you think, huh? Are you a junkie? He says to an African American person asking a legitimate question on television.
I wonder if he's asked that question of Bill Clinton, because Bill Clinton would say, "Come on, man, why would I take a test?"
And you go further down the story, I believe when Trump admitted that he had taken a test and quote gotten high marks on the cognitive test, at that time back in June, I think, or July, June, former vice president claimed he was constantly tested. I mean,
For syphilis.
I don't know. For sanity.
That's crazy. But then here, apparently someone said, this is, I think, what you would call an oxymoron. That's a stupid question.
Perez
with all due
is
respect.
an oxymoron.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess with all due respect could be very little respect due. Because
It's a condescending comment, but you're trying to walk it back and clean it up on MSDNC. I mean, it's just, if the guy had one minor slip up, and on balance, his record was fantastic. He hadn't gone around. I mean, here's a guy, review the bidding. And this is the best the Democrats, they're giving you the best that they've got, right? They say, select a guy who's been in the swamp since, antediluvian times for a long time.
The Jurassic period.
They pick him up out of the swamp, attempt to clean him off, and then somebody says, "Hey, Perez, did you know in 1988, Biden admitted that he was a stone cold liar, and that's why he dropped out of the 1988 Democratic primaries, because he lied about his how well he did at law school. He lied about there he is. There's Biden right there. You can see him right there. See the long hair on his legs.
Yeah, the kids can feel his legs in the pool.
So you go back to 1988. He's been a disaster there. As Zell Miller, a Democrat, said at the one of the conventions, I forget which one, he said that Joe Biden has been on every major foreign policy, and I would add domestic policy question in modern times, Joe Biden has been 100% wrong. He was very much, he's a Democrat trying to get the Democratic nomination, and he was very much in favor of Bill Clinton's crime bill, which, African Americans and even Jared Kushner and some in the Trump camp believe the provisions of that crime bill really hurt.
Bill Clinton said it. Bill Clinton himself has come out and said that it was a mistake, the crime bill.
But it was his legacy.
But now, 20 years later.
Okay, right, yeah. That's a man of principle, Back when I did it, I thought it was great. I wrote books about it. I got paid. People promoted me around the world for my vision. Now, the mood of the country has changed, so I'll try to get on the right side of history by just lying.
Everybody buys it.
And, and so then you get to this question of, who's the guy, Charlemagne the God?
Yeah.
Who started asking, and I think it's fair, particularly on the Democrats. People assume Republicans have given up on the African American community, which is not true. And I think it is absolutely fair, in particular for a media personality like Charlemagne the God, to ask Joe Biden why he deserves support from African Americans. What is it about his policies that's going to benefit all Americans, but in particular African Americans? And Biden, his response is to say, "Oh, you're asking tough questions? if you don't support Joe Biden for president, you're not black. Or he actually said, you ain't black, and cut the interview short.
Joe Biden cut it short, or Charlemagne the God cut it short?
Biden cut it. Biden was supposed to be on this radio show or whatever show for a long period of time. You sign somebody up. Larry Nichols might have been on for an hour and a half or whatever, and it doesn't matter that he had to go. It's great that
I think he was getting tired.
He gave us a lot of his time. I really appreciate it. But I mean, this Charlemagne person is lined up, somebody who could be the next president of the United States. He's got a big audience, not Biden. Charlemagne, the God, has a big audience. Gigantic. And Biden's like, well, come on, you asked me a tough question. I'm out of here. My wife needs this. I've got, the dog ate my homework. But I want to be president.
Yeah. And that excuse of his wife is going to use that doesn't really fly to me, because we saw that other picture where it has quite clearly been set up. I mean, Charles, I can tell you, this is a TV studio. Somebody's come in there and we've got little, things propping up the table, and this is all very carefully. His wife's not coming in there and doing anything. This would be an annoying place to do your regular work with the desk 2 feet off the ground and stuff.
There's no lipstick that you could put on this pig. I mean, honestly, when you look at this, there's going to be, as I walked here, I actually can reveal that I got a book that Monica Lewinsky wrote, which I intend to read carefully. She had a ghostwriter work with her, but
How to Date Jake Tapper.
And I went out of my way. Normally, I just go up the west side to get to your place, and I went out of my way over to Barnes and Noble and Union Square, and then I was walking up Broadway, and I walked in the 1920s. I walked by this guy who, he had tattoos and his shirt off, and you began to worry about that a little bit. But then he was just, in a very matter-of-fact way, making all these incredibly racist comments that made no sense, but he was absolutely sure of himself. And for a second, I thought to myself, Joe, what are you doing here? Hey, put that shirt on, man. Nobody wants to see that.
And what was it like outside, Charles? Because I was out yesterday. Again, another extremely unpleasant encounter. It's become oppressive just moving around the city.
It's actually pretty nice today, but
weather-wise,
yeah. So on the Biden, though.
But sorry, while we're talking about how oppressive it is to move around the city, I think we should, at least for a moment before we go back to Biden, talk about this whole quarantine checkpoint deal.
Yeah, DeCrazio has announced that there are going to be checkpoints, key entry points coming into New York City, where you're going to have to. I don't know if you're going to have to be tested, or you're going to have to. Whether you have it or not, go into quarantine and provide information to this newly created tracing corps.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's outrageous.
And also this forcible medical testing, that is highly objectionable. I don't want that thing jammed in my throat, my nose. How do we know what this training is? If these people are doing it properly, they could make you sick, they could injure you. I don't like any of this at all.
Yeah. And it's not like DeCrazio has a fantastic record. I mean, everything the guy touches turns to shit or worse.
Well, here's another guy.
And he's even worse.
I agree. He's getting tan, though. He's got a lot of time. And every time you see him, he's got his big, stupid mouth open. And I think instead of a face covering, he needs a sweat sock jamming in there.
Yeah. But just if we can return for a second back to Biden. I mean, today is August 5th. Yeah. Yesterday was Barack Obama's birthday.
Oh, boy.
And, interesting that somehow somebody decided to raid the oligarch's office in Cleveland connected to Privat Bank.
Really?
FBI raid yesterday.
Oh, right. Oh, I didn't know that was part of Privat Bank.
Now, who's the person to the right of...
I don't know. He says, make America... I guess it's a Trump impersonator?
Yeah.
But not doing a good job.
Yeah, so we have, it's August 5th. There's going to be this gathering in Milwaukee on, I guess it's the 17th to the 20th, involving Democrats who are in theory going to anoint a ticket to try to compete against Donald Trump. Donald Trump has his faults, we all do, but one of the amazing strengths that he has is his ability to connect to the public using the media and social media. And he's got a gigantic budget. which Bite Me does not have.
I thought he does from all the Democrat money.
Nothing close to what the Trump directly and indirectly through his various committees and offshoots. And remember, Trump really destroyed Hillary Clinton in 2016, spending less than 50% of what she spent officially. So, and I don't think this is a case of, Biden is so smart and so powerful that he's laying this scenario out there so you underestimate him or misunderestimate him. Right. This is just an idiot confirming. One of our listeners suggested, our viewers suggested, that we have a lower category than idiot, and that's a fidiot. We won't say it's obvious and implied what the F is. We won't, family-friendly show, we're not going to use that word. But this guy's a fidiot, and a fish rots from the head. So if you're going to put a fidiot in as president of the United States... Again, you have to assume... This is like the summit right here. The fidiot summit. Yeah.
Exactly what he's saying right now is...
Did you understand that? Or it's like, what's your favorite color?
He's like, hey, is that Prel? Sniffing George W.
Yeah. It's just, it's really...
Doesn't pass the smell test, Charles.
Doesn't pass the smell test. But I mean, I think if you're sitting there as somebody who normally supports Democrats, and if you're a moderate Democrat, and you look and see, we have AOC has decided that she's going to win the Hispanic chapter Rachel Dolezal Award. She goes out on Twitter and says that Hispanic Americans are actually black, and blacks
How
didn't
did she come up with that?
I don't know.
But she's facing a backlash over comments. Does it say blacklash?
No, backlash.
Oh yeah, because then they'd be facing a blacklash.
Yeah, and so you've
got Van
that.
Jones, right? The white lash.
Right. Well, no, somebody wrote a book, Blacklash, as well.
Oh.
But you look at this idiot who, I'm sorry, you don't get to, just because you're elected, that doesn't mean that you go right up onto a pedestal and everything you say is deemed to be right. That's obvious by what happened to President Trump. I mean, he didn't get that courtesy. But
this is a new word to me.
Yeah, colorism. And it's just...
I hate chartreuse. Oh, you're a colorist. Actually, there's a lot of colorists.
She could be a colorist.
Well, you got to be very skilled to be a colorist. You're going to have to know Da Vinci Resolve or one of these things, and then you get a job in one of these dark rooms, and they say, bring up the skin tones a little bit. That's a colorist. This is just stupid.
Yeah, it's just stuck on seriously stupid.
She's got her kindergarten drawings behind her.
I know. I mean, it just does not inspire a great deal of confidence. But you're sitting there, you're a moderate Democrat, with a lot of money and a lot of assets and a lot of potential liabilities. And the lemming wing of your party, the stupid lemming wing of your party, is running full speed for the cliff, Thelma and Louise style. I mean, they're just going right off the cliff and forcing Biden and the Democrats to espouse a party that makes Marxism look like, full-throated capitalism. The difference between what they're advocating and what Marx is advocating, it's just absurd that they have as much influence as they do. You have, Weekend at Bernie, whose campaign is...
He hasn't said much lately.
He's dead.
Well, not really.
Well, in a political sense, he's dead. And you have these crazies in the Democratic Party believing that what they advocate is going to sway voters in November. And I think they very effectively have blown up the traditional Democratic Party. And more importantly, animated people like me who used to be Republican, and I am independent and have been for a number of years, to say, there's no way. I mean, I wouldn't, to be charitable here in New York, if a Democrat came along, perhaps I'd listen. Maybe there's some element of their platform that I could reluctantly say, well, okay, it's just a congressperson. There are a lot of other people. I like this person's position on pick a topic. I don't like this guy's position on anything. And I think he frankly is an affront and a danger to all Americans with his crackpot theories, with his crooked wife, who bankrupted a charity.
Bernie, you mean?
Yeah, and this whole wing that gets up and says something like, we can't predict the weather tomorrow, but we're certain that global warming is going to destroy the planet. So it's like getting a double mastectomy if you have cancer in your family. Destroy your part of your anatomy.
Angelina Jolie did that.
As did Kayleigh McEnany, the press secretary.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a real thing. If you have a long history of breast cancer in your line, it can actually make sense to do that. But
I don't think I agree with that.
It can. People say, I have friends who've done it, but the point and are still living. But the point is that it doesn't make sense to pile $93 trillion of debt on the U.S. economy to advance a plan that nobody's written, whose intellectual sponsorship is from a bartender. I mean, who thinks that Latinos are black? I mean, this is just, might as well put Soupy Sales in, or Stewie from Family Guy.
Well, I was going to say, I just saw a thing that they're reviving Ren and Stimpy. I think they might make a good ticket for the Democrats.
I like Ren and Stimpy.
Not even real, but they're smarter than Joe Biden.
Yeah, a brick is smarter than Joe Biden.
Yeah. It's true. 100% of the nation's power demand met with renewables by 2030. Now, we have an associate in Norway who has pointed out that, and this is very often true, these wonderful windmills seem like an excellent way to generate power, but they also have a number of issues that are, having an impact on the environment, not the least of which is the mining for the rare earth minerals that are used to make the extremely powerful magnets inside there that generate electricity. Also, the people who live around them, they generate noise, they kill birds, they do all kinds of things. So none of these solutions are ever perfect, and the concept of throwing out the baby with the bathwater from an engineering standpoint is usually bad. Right. Probably could do a lot of things for much less money and much easier and accessible technologies to increase the efficiency of hybrid electric cars and just increasing the fuel efficiency of internal combustion engines and other things like that.
I mean, I think AOC is the female equivalent of Mikey, the cereal commercials. Mikey likes it. AOC likes it. So we should all like it. I mean, Mikey was smarter.
I never understood those commercials because they said, give it to Mikey. He doesn't like anything. So why would you give it to him? He's a bad judge. Why don't we find the most reasonable child who likes some things and not others and let him judge? Yeah. Instead, we have this picky kid who hates everything except for Life cereal.
Yeah. I was a picky eater as a child, so I have some sympathy for this. But
it's good casting. These kids do look, they probably are brothers, right? They all look alike.
Yeah, they have not recently been to dentists, but they...
Well, you can't win them all, Charles. Yeah. Now, I hope I don't get some sort of a problem from showing that Life commercial. I think I've mentioned this previously, but for people who are watching us right now, Charles, the main Jason Goodman YouTube channel, which just crossed 114,000 regular subscribers today, has received a strike.
One strike.
Yeah, one strike. But it's very strange because, they're saying that it's going to prevent, they've changed the policy since last time. The last time there was a malicious strike from malicious social engineers, the policy was no live streaming for a month, but one strike, no live streaming, two strikes, no uploading. Now, one strike is no live streaming, no uploading for a week. However, when I went to appeal it, it said, you are SOL until November 3rd.
What's happening on November 3rd?
Right. The election. Isn't that interesting? And it's also 3 months, not 1 week. I'm not a math guy, but you tell me.
Yeah, they're trying. I mean, it's very clear that, remember when Obama was talking about, everyone was talking about metadata?
Right.
They're collecting metadata. And well, I was
don't worry about it.
There's
It's no big
nothing.
deal.
Don't worry about that. We're just looking at metadata. What can metadata tell you? We're not listening to your phone call. It's just metadata.
Oh wait, yes we are.
Yeah, we're not listening to your phone call. We're transcribing it. We're translating it,
downloading it, storing it. Then when we get you in the kangaroo court, then we'll listen to it.
Yeah, that's right.
Now we're just saving them all in Bluffdale, Utah, so we can listen to it later.
Right, but you have these giants, the Googles, the Microsoft, the Amazon, whatever, Twitter, Facebook, and these corporate titans are a lot richer in 2020 than they were in 2016.
Yeah.
And they've seen how Donald Trump plays hardball, and they see how Donald Trump is working on...
But what do you mean? How does he play hardball? Nothing hard has happened to them.
Take TikTok. I mean, he takes a look at the situation, decides it's a security risk, suggests that the Chinese entity that owns TikTok in the U.S. needs to sell it. ByteDance. And that a large portion of the proceeds is going to go to the U.S. Treasury. I mean, that's an interesting approach.
Isn't that weird? How can the president demand that a company sell itself and we're going to get the money, by the way?
I don't know. I think this is part of a large conversation in China. I do know, because I looked hard at it when I was thinking through the General Motors attempted restructuring, or the fable that it had been restructured. You want to do business in China as a non-Chinese company, you have to, in the past, you couldn't have a 100% owned subsidiary, you had to have a Chinese partner, you had to share technology with that partner. The subject of taking a dividend out of China has not really come up yet because most of those companies are losing money. But it's a very one-sided agreement. It's kind of like the software use agreement you might sign when you sign up for Microsoft, or the terms of service for using Google or Facebook or Twitter.
Right.
And so I think Trump is sending a larger message here to the Chinese that, we don't buy the bullshit on the trade deal. We don't buy the bullshit on the Wuhan virus story. We don't buy the bullshit that you say you're negotiating in good faith. And you shouldn't buy the bullshit in the fake news because I'm going to win. And as tough as you think I may be now, when I win, I'm going to kick some communist Chinese party ass. And I think that is the message being sent to China.
I'm pretty sure I just heard somebody interviewing, I mean, a lot of our viewers don't like this guy, but I'm pretty interested in the things that Elon Musk is up to. And they're building this Tesla gigafactory in China. When they talk about a gigafactory, it's got to do with the amount of gigawatts of battery production it can do. But apparently, in order to open this factory, he got China to change the law where they don't own it. He is still the owner of it.
Yeah, and of course, China would never change the law at the last minute.
Like, oh, by the way, we're taking that whole factory. Yeah. Right.
What you just said, you own the factory here in China,
but
try to get inside to it, right?
Yeah. Well, that's always been a concern of mine. Like, people buy houses and stuff in foreign countries. And I mean, look at what's happening in this country. They can basically do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah. It's this whole China fable. I mean, it's part and parcel of what we've been talking about. And maybe we should think about heading towards the exit door, because I know you've got other stuff you have to do today. But the real story, the big picture story, is that the Bush family, the Clintons, then the Obamas, and others, with Soros and many other big titans, had big multinational companies and big academic operations and big media operations, are all in for the project of kowtowing to China and bowing down before the future leaders of the world coming out of India based on the sizes of their population.
Why would Bill Clinton do that, give all that military stuff to China?
Because he doesn't give a shit. I mean, he's just...
But, I mean, doesn't he know it's going to destroy...
Well, you heard what Larry said, that Clinton was all in for communism. And if you're in for communism, you spent time in the Soviet Union while you had your Rhodes Scholarship during the Vietnam War, when the Soviets were on the North Vietnamese side and we're fighting, with the South Vietnamese. If you're going to do that when you're a student, and then you're going to continue to do what he did when he was governor, having the various communist Chinese connected crooks come into Arkansas, and then when he was president, you plainly got a worldview that, nothing's really going to matter all that much after he's gone. So let's find as many, women and the occasional man to mess around with, and let's steal as much money as we can. Let's have as much fun as we can. Let's show the world who's powerful and who isn't. And we're all going to be dead anyway, so who cares? I mean, that's I think the mentality of this type of sociopath,
right,
who was in the White House, and his wife, in name only, wanted to be in the White House and still may want to be in the White House. And that's a mentality that's disgusting.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, he's obviously not too concerned about doing the right thing based on every single thing he's ever done.
Right. He's anti-Spike Lee. Do the wrong thing.
Yeah. Spike Lee's kind of rude, in my opinion.
Was he an NYU film school guy?
Yeah. He went to NYU Film School, and then he taught at NYU Film School, and his most recent films, the entire crew, are film students.
Really?
Yeah, so it's like costs nothing. I mean, that'd be interesting if you were in his class to actually work on a film, but I mean, that's a little bit like the 5'1" grip that ESPN hired, and I asked him if he had any experience gripping, and he said, gripping what? Who hired this guy? Well, Charles, this was a historic episode where you have finally had a conversation with Larry Nichols. I was pleased to facilitate that.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And a great graphic as well. I love Bill's anxious eyes there. He's got a birthday coming up, August 19th.
How old will he be?
I think he will be 74.
Wow, that's not that old. I mean, when I saw him speaking at John Lewis's funeral, he sounded decrepit. I mean, Larry's just been through months of coma and crazy hospitalization. Sounds energetic compared to Bill Clinton.
Well, if you're Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and the team around the Clinton Foundation right now, you're in serious trouble, because it's not simply the problems of never organizing or operating lawfully any part of your foundation. That's not really the only set of problems you have. The real problem is your repetitive lies under oath around the world, not simply in the US, to multiple donors who, frankly, are not as rich as they once were if they're governments, and who need money back. And so when you blow this thing up, which could happen, people are not going to say, they might say it's all my fault. If I'd shut up, then this would never have come to light. That's a ridiculous argument.
Except almost nobody ever says that about anything.
Right, I know. So there, somebody's going to come and say, well, whose idea was it? And who benefited the most from this crooked enterprise? And it's going to be the slickster and Hillary and Chelsea. And, when you're sitting there and you once were worth, as Bill Gates, let's say he's worth 100 billion or whatever the number is, and governments around the world start saying, listen, Bill, you obviously knew about this, and you could have told us, and we could have stopped it, and now we're out, $1 billion at Unitate, and we want not just $1 billion back, we want 25 billion.
Whoa.
And then the Global Fund, yes, you put some money into that, but you got us involved in projects around the world that really cost us a tremendous amount of money and impugned the remaining integrity of the World Health Organization. So we'll take another 250 billion back for that. I mean, at a certain
how's he going to get that?
Well, at a certain point, Bill Gates is sitting there and saying, I'm not taking this shot alone. You're going to blame it on Bill. You're going to blame it on Chelsea. You're going to blame it on Hillary. You're going to blame it on the folks around, the trustees of the Clinton Foundation. You're going to blame it on the banks that lent to the Clinton Foundation. You're going to blame it on
the Stevens.
You might blame it on Stevens, but you'll blame it on the accounting firms and the law firms and all of those people who are being blamed for the sins of the Clintons are going to come back to the Clintons saying, we're not taking this alone. And at a certain point, Clinton and his will to fight goes out of the equation, and maybe Hillary's will to fight goes out of the equation. Then you're left with the diarrhea expert and her fraudster husband.
Do we have any updates on the Tiger beat?
None. Although I can say just
from the list of whatever, right?
Well, I can just say that in the time that I've had, I'm actually grateful for the time in the lockdown, because it's allowed me to go back over a large amount of material in a very disciplined fashion, and 100% confident that the books and records of the Clinton Foundation from October 23, 1997 to the present are wholly false.
Yeah.
An invention. They're completely wrong. This is not the type of charity that it's supposed to be. It has failed the organizational, the operational tests. It's not a close call. Anybody who said that they were a legitimate organization who lent their credibility to it is in deep trouble. Accounting firms, law firms, many of them. The trustees are in deep trouble. And it's just a question. I'll perhaps close with Trump's comments to Lou Dobbs, where Lou, I've taken to watching him today, obviously he's on right now, so I'm not watching him, but he is, like you and like me, is trying to push Trump and push Barr and push Durham to actually do something. And he asked Trump, forcefully, at the end of the interview yesterday, he said, look, Mr. President, what's going on with Barr and Durham? The viewers expect justice here. We're going to see it. Right. And Trump said, listen, I can't tell you the details, but the headline is that Barack Obama and Joe Biden spied on my campaign. They spied and obstructed during the transition, and they spied and obstructed on my presidency. And we caught them. Those are his words. We caught them. And again, I can't discuss the details, but he so much said I've seen it, and the scope of it is breathtaking. And that's,
so is it going to be a Trump October surprise?
I don't think Dobbs was pushing and saying, no, we can't wait. We've got to move here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. And I think that
I
is...
like Lou Dobbs.
Yeah, I do too. And it was also interesting to listen to Trump on a phone call with Dobbs from shortly after 5 to shortly after 5:30. And then Trump did a press conference live, in the White House press briefing room at like 6:15 or thereabouts. Again, just up there speaking to the audience, taking a few questions, taking no shit. I mean, this is a person who's not hiding in his basement.
A lot of energy, like a remarkable amount of energy.
Right. And even though Mike Tyson is in his 50s, I wouldn't advise a 30. He's getting back in the ring apparently too.
No, he's got to be younger than me, I think. No,
I don't think so. I saw him on a press conference. I think he said he was 52 or 53.
Wow.
And he's getting back in the ring. I would not advise anybody
to mess with Mike Tyson.
Yeah, exactly. And similarly, yeah, he's 53. So no, wait, what is that? That's Linda Bloodworth Thompson.
54. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, yeah.
I mean, think about it. He's 5'10" and he weighs 240 pounds.
No, I mean, he's just the most destructive boxer. One of the most, just sheer power. When I was in high school and Mike Tyson was at the pinnacle of his career, I know a lot of people object to boxing. It's violent and all that, but...
It is?
Yeah. He was so unstoppable. They used to do, I'm sure you recall, pay-per-view on cable to watch the fights. And so we would all, like this friend of mine, his dad had one of those, you remember those projection TVs with the 3 primary colors, and it would project on the mirror, and you'd have this like incredibly bulbous screen, and it was the crappiest thing ever, but it was such a big TV. So we would all go over to this guy's house and chip in for the pay-per-view, but it was like 30 seconds for a fight.
Yeah.
And then people just started not buying the fights anymore, so I think they stuck him in jail to create the triumphant comeback where he bit off Evander Holyfield's ear.
I remember when I was in elementary school and really right through college, I was very, very skinny, really skinny. And the doctors would say, well, you need to fatten him up and you need to toughen him up.
They said, listen, fat.
My mother's brilliant solution, and I believe she loved me, was to enter me and my next brother down into a boxing contest.
How does that help you gain weight? I was going to say that's where you were introduced to McDonald's.
Right, no, and I'm like, I thought about that for a while. I watched a little boxing, and I'm thinking to myself, it's going to break me in half here.
Yeah,
because
it was
not in the Episcopalian private school league. It was in the Catholic school boxing league where you'd be boxing against these bigger kids. And I'm like, Mom, I don't think this is a good idea. You're going to go to boxing.
Wow.
And thankfully, cooler heads prevailed, and I didn't have to do it.
amazing.
I probably would have died at age 10 if that had happened.
Yeah, I mean, usually the story is more like, oh, there's a bully at school, and your father says, listen, you punch him in the nose, that'll be the end of it. And your mother's like, no, don't talk to him, ignore him, don't fight.
Yeah, that's right.
Charles's mother's like, go to boxing, I'll see you when you're back.
Yeah, that's right. We only have enough budget for 2 of you.
Pugilism, Charles.
That's right, exactly.
Yes.
Thankfully, that didn't happen.
And so with that, I think we will bid our viewers adieu for now. I want to remind everybody that, this is really outrageous that they're going to try. All YouTube has to do is ignore that appeal until November 3rd. And what can I do?
We have some ideas.
Yeah. But in the meantime, I hope that people will join me on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Pick which one you like, but sponsoring the show, it helps me deal with these social engineering attacks on the channel. Very unfortunate. I'm going to see what can be done about it. But thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow.